All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Managing Partners Podcast. I'm Kevin Daisey, and I'm your host. And today I have a really cool guest coming out of Los Angeles, California, Hugo Gomez. Welcome to the show.
Kevin, awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hugo actually had his team reach out, and we always, we had a little chat and was really liking what he was up to. He does kind of what we do, but he's very specific in a niche market, and this in the Spanish speaking market. And they work with law firms, helping them in that capacity. So very unique, very cool, obviously a growing market. And so I said, yeah, I'd like to have you on and let's talk about these things because law firms should be aware. They should be thinking about new things, right? AI, Google changes, all this stuff, Spanish speaking content. All these things that we're trying to bring to you on the show that can help you have an edge and stay ahead on things. So Hugo, tell us your story. How did you come to be where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I've always worked in lead generation for 15, maybe 16, 17 years at this point. Digital marketing background, worked a lot in consumer finance and commercial finance, like heavy equipment lending. That was fun. But then I got into legal because I heard it was significantly harder. I experienced that at a couple lead generation companies and decided to branch off on my own to provide bespoke agency services to attorneys that don't speak Spanish, but recognize that they need to advertise in Spanish. And that was a little over 6 years ago. And now Abogados Now, our outfit is across all the Americas. We have a staff of over 50 bilingual digital marketing pros, and they're all fully bilingual. We largely focus on digital, and our North Star is generating leads for attorneys in these markets that have high Hispanic populations.
That's awesome. So website address is down below. If you're watching, it's down on the screen here. If you're listening, it's abogadosnow.com. You can take a look and see what Hugo is all about. But so very specific. And I also like that you said, and this is very true, that legal marketing or lead generation is a challenge and it's competitive. And you were like, I want to go that direction. So I have people ask me all the time, why the hell did you choose to work with lawyers for one? And I think that's a bad thing for some stupid reason. And then that sounds like a very challenging place to be. And so one of those things is true. It is challenging, but I love working with lawyers. I have a lot of friends, clients, guests on the show. So I've enjoyed that more than I probably thought I would going into it, but it's a challenging space to be in and can be quite competitive depending on what you're doing. But Hugo, you went into like hey, there's a niche over here that's not being fulfilled.
Yeah.
We've even thought about it. We have a Spanish kind of option that we can do and stuff like that. But I have a few Spanish speaking team members, but we don't have the support that we would really need to do what you're doing, right? Being that specific and running ad copy and all that stuff. So we just don't have that kind of team. So again, that's why I love what you're doing, and we're not really a direct competitor in that capacity. So happy to have it on the show. So
yeah, I don't know that we have that many direct competitors. It's harder work. I think generally speaking, it's not that the general English market's easier. It's more so that just working for Hispanic markets is just undoubtedly more work because there's more market research per local area. You have to study, immigrant makeups of local areas. Then you need to, produce the right teams for these certain markets. So I think just the legal category is hard because there's only a finite amount of cases per day. We're not Coca-Cola. We can't make someone want to have a divorce or have a car accident, So we're working with a finite amount of cases per day. And we just need to make sure that our clients stand out in these competitive landscapes. So we find that having Spanish is so much of a secret, not so much a secret sauce, but it is a competitive edge. And it's just more work, candidly, it's just more work because the strategies that you employ in certain states don't work universally. So yeah, it's a cool niche to be in. And what I find is that the ones that think that they're not prepared for it are oftentimes the ones that are most prepared for it.
Yeah, well, I've had some conversations in the past when we were kind of like feeling it out, the market, and saying, hey, we found some, Spanish solutions, and it was by Carlos on my team who speaks Spanish, and he was like, I think we can look at this, but I don't speak Spanish, and I'm the one that's doing most of the client interaction and sales and stuff like that. So there's definitely some pieces missing there, right? And it makes it very
Right.
difficult. But I talk to a lot of firms like, yeah, we don't need that at all, and they would immediately say, we have no one in our firm that would be able to take that call. And so when you say they're not equipped for it, they think that there's impossible for them to fill that. And so, but then again, there's lots of firms I know that absolutely have that in place.
Yeah.
But what they haven't done is the advertising, the marketing. And then if you don't know, if you search on Google for personal injury attorney, and then you search that in Spanish,
Right.
there's a totally different result.
Totally
different result that comes up. And the people playing in that space is very minimal. There's not many people playing in that space. So, that's something to think about. Is it
and it shouldn't be minimal, because the Hispanic market makes up like 20% of the country, so it's not this like small market. It's not even incremental. I call it a super vital market. And I really think that the firms that last in the next decade plus are the ones that have a bilingual strategy. I hate to sound so dramatic about it, but if you don't have like a viable Spanish strategy, you're toast, because all signs point to increased immigration. All signs point to Hispanic markets wanting not just English marketing, but also Spanish marketing. I myself, I'm Hispanic. I was born in Ecuador. I can speak fluently in Spanish. I can read and write in Spanish. I prefer to read, write, and speak in English. However, I'm appealed to a lot of brands that speak to me in Spanish as well. And so that's, as someone who's lived in the United States virtually my entire life, I think I represent a segment of the market that is underspoken about in Hispanic conversations. It's not just the Hispanic person who only speaks Spanish, who came into the country in the last couple of years. Now there's scores of different types of segments within the Hispanic market. So I think it's super diverse. There's a lot of opportunity if you do it right, but like you said, you just need to staff accordingly. I don't think it's that much of a science on the fulfillment side. You need someone to answer calls in Spanish. You need at least one person on the inside to establish a relationship with Hispanic clients that are generated from these efforts. If you've got that covered, you're golden. All you need to do is scale there. And especially now, there's great companies out there that do virtual bilingual staffing. It's like you have no excuse now to not staff for bilingual staff.
It's even easier now. And here's the thing is, like what you were saying is, the thing that they can't also speak English is wrong, right? So you're not just going to get a client that's like, they can't speak. I mean, you'll get some, but I have a client that's, she speaks Spanish. She's divorced in Miami, and she niches in working with Spanish speaking clients. Her website's in English, not in Spanish, and she markets to them, but she uses that she does speak Spanish and can work with them, talk with them. But she's too small. She doesn't have really the means to do a lot of this stuff, but she attracts them with stuff in Spanish or posts her in Spanish, and she does a lot of like other marketing. But they all speak to her in English for the most part once they engage. So she can speak Spanish, and if they need help or they need more of that, then she can do it. But she's most of them, they're trying to speak English more often, and they prefer that over the Spanish. So, don't think that you're just going to get people that they cannot speak a word of English, and
right.
There's plenty of the market out there that just prefers to be marketed that way. So,
but even for the folks that just want to speak Spanish, what I find so interesting is that even if you do have Spanish speaking staff, and that Spanish speaking client who only speaks Spanish or would rather only speak Spanish, they will more often than not bring a loved one with them who speaks English with them to a meeting
Oh,
who speaks English. So I've always thought that was fascinating, that even if the intake is an 11 out of 10 in Spanish, a lot of credibility established, trust established,
yep.
even with the promise that, hey, this meeting's conducted, or rather future meetings are conducted entirely in Spanish. It's still fascinating, the overwhelming number of Spanish speakers. They bring someone with them who speaks English. It makes sense. I think of my mom, for instance. My mom can speak English, certainly. She prefers to speak Spanish. But when she goes to the doctor, she's like, hey, you want to come with me? Just in case I don't understand something. I'm like, yeah, for sure. I get it. And I might be just a fly on the wall. I might just offer one or two meaningful translation phrases. But my mom wants to bring me occasionally, so to the bank or to the doctor. And while she can handle her business herself, certainly, I just find that, especially
More comfortable.
immigrants, they feel more comfortable if they just bring someone else with them. So there's always you can always help the Hispanic community out, regardless of that language barrier. And I think the staffing capabilities, especially the virtual staffing capabilities, are such where there's no excuse not to hire for bilingual markets anymore. Like, this is such a necessity. I was talking to an attorney in Western Colorado where there's like a thriving Spanish speaking market. Colorado, not very known, or rather associated to having huge Hispanic markets. They're having like a Hispanic renaissance in Western Colorado, and they're seeing it across their community. They see Hispanic folks, and they're now in that position where they say, okay, as opposed to just pretending this renaissance isn't there, why don't we just staff accordingly for it? And I couldn't be more in agreement for it. Even if you don't see those staggering numbers of Hispanics in your market, staff up for it, because the market is growing.
100%. And just a couple quick things here. Like Rebecca she works for us. She does kind of operations. She's been doing a lot of account management. So she talks to our clients a lot. Well, she's from America. She lives in Miami. Her husband's 100% Spanish speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Her kids, who are American born, they almost all speak Spanish. Like, that's what they prefer. You would never know. And she's completely fluent. But we have a couple clients that speak Spanish, and they love when she can talk to them in Spanish. And she doesn't do it the whole time. It might just be a little bit of, personal talk and whatever, and it just makes them so much more comfortable. I mean, all the meetings are pretty much held in English, of course. So, yeah, it brings that level of trust and comfort, like, immediately. That connection so much better, even if it's just, hey, we're gonna have this in English for the most part, but they can kind of have that bond. So, yeah, I think what Hugo is saying is, you have to have this robust, like, Spanish arm of the company that has to run on its own and support all these people. There's so many tools now, and virtual assistants and all these other things that you can utilize to bring on and start. You don't have to go all in until you're comfortable and you see that that's a viable business for you. Depending on what state you're in. If you're in Florida or Texas or California or any of those states, you're behind if you haven't done any of this yet.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was talking to yesterday a COO of, I would say, probably the third or fourth largest virtual staffing company in the world, and he said something that kind of blew me away. One is that there's a trend in countries, let's call it in the G20, that are now outsourcing talent out of their own countries with talent in the United States, which I thought was kind of funny. Kind of breaks all the misconceptions about outsourcing. But two, that in Latin America and South Asian Pacific, namely the Philippines, where outsourcing is such a vital component of their economies, the cost per, let's call it the cost per virtual professional, is going up substantially. So I see sort of a race component here, meaning a speed component. If you lock in virtual staff right now outside the United States, you're probably going to get a more reasonable competitive rate that's better for your P&L for the next couple years versus hiring the same comparable staff in a couple years, because the world is getting a little flatter, and the wages, as the demand for the talent will present themselves, will increase. So not only is there a obvious benefit to addressing the Hispanic market with virtual bilingual staff, of course, there's obviously, I'm biased. My whole company is built around that. But two, it's just in general for bookkeeping, for HR onboarding, offboarding, for accounting work, for copywriting, for web design. Like, you need to build out that virtual off or near shore staff now, because that staff is only going to rise in cost. And I can't speak to what organization it was, but they're up there. You know, they know the space quite well, and they know that a few things are going to happen. The wages are going to increase, and there's going to be laws in these countries that will, one way or another, impact the margins just overall. So let's just put a hypothetical. Country XYZ has 10% of its population working in virtual capacity. Country XYZ might say, all right, well, we're going to charge you a new tax. It's a virtual staff tax. You owe us extra fees or extra funds, extra taxes. Now you're essentially taking out wages from the worker. The worker's going to say, well, listen, my country's demanding that I pay more in taxes annually. You got to pay me more. I think this is going to be a massive tectonic shift in virtual staffing. I think a lot of countries are aware of the leverage that they now have with the influx of revenue coming to their countries. And so, I know we're not here to talk about virtual staffing, but I think this is such a key topic for any growing business, especially those that are kind of transitioning away from domestic to off and nearshore talent. But it's so critical that you get a vibe on what's happening right now in the virtual staffing, because you're just going to end up paying the same, if not more, if you're not making those moves right now in virtual staffing.
Yeah, I mean, I have a virtual staff, Christine. She's in the Philippines, and she's been with us for 2-3 years, maybe 3 years.
Yeah,
awesome. We love her to death, and she helps us with so much stuff that we rely on her for. She does a lot with this podcast, actually, as far as getting this out and distribution and all that stuff. So absolutely been a blessing to us. And when we found her, it was through a company that we found her through, I guess. But at some point, we ended up connecting with her separately, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm only making like $2 an hour." We're like, "Holy crap, no way!" So we ended up going straight to her and giving her more than what her company was. We were paying the company, and it's like mind blowing money for her probably, but not much for us. And so she's been with us, dedicated, and we want to make sure that she was taken care of. But yeah, if you have a large staff of folks like that, or rely on that, and you have tight margins, then that could be a problem for sure. But also, I think what Hugo's getting at is there solutions to get into this and handle it versus what you might be thinking. Oh, I got to hire people, and what if who manage them, and if they don't speak Spanish or English, like, so there's you got to look at the market opportunity. So I want to kind of get into what you see in the data and the growth, and why firms should really be paying attention to this stuff, just like you should be paying attention to AI.
Yeah.
And all these other things that are happening. Yeah, we do virtual everything now, right? A couple years ago, that was ridiculous to think.
Right.
So how are you keeping up with these things? But as far as this is concerned, with the law firm that's in Virginia, where I'm at, right? I have a cul-de-sac. I live in a cul-de-sac neighborhood. There's only 9 houses in my whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
One of my neighbors is from Ecuador. The other one's from Bolivia.
Got it.
So out of 9 houses, I got 2 from other, from South America that are very good friends and neighborly, and they all speak English as well as Spanish. But that's just a small small subset. But
That
if you're in a
sample
state
size,
where
though,
you're in a state where I'm sorry.
that sample size, 20% is the exact sample size of the United States. 20% of the United States is of Hispanic origin. So you
Yeah,
nailed
and
it.
I'm in Virginia, which
Yeah.
is, you would be like, oh, that's so. If you're in a state, you run a firm, and you're like, well, there's no market for me.
Yeah.
And what should firms be looking at? What should they be thinking about? Why should they be tracking this stuff?
Well, I mean, if you look at the census data, obviously the Californias, the Texas, the Floridas of the world, they're going to continue seeing overwhelming growth in the Hispanic market. But the fastest growth that the census reported were from the Montana, rather the Dakotas, Montana,
Oh,
Kentucky, the Carolinas. So states that aren't typically associated with having high Hispanic populations are now seeing high Hispanic percentage growth. Obviously, because the data's pool is smaller, so any meaningful change is going to show up in percentages. So even if you don't see that at the same levels of the Californias or the Floridas of the world, you should still be prepared for the census data. Overwhelmingly says that this is happening across the country. This isn't, border specific. And I think that you should hedge your bets that you will overwhelmingly start to see growing Hispanic markets in your community. For instance, in Virginia, I would bet it's probably less than 5% of the country that's Hispanic, compared to the index of the United States, was just 20%. So a 5% though, that's 1 out of 20 people. That's still pretty meaningful, right? And that's not something to ignore. And so even if the percentages aren't significant by your own standards, you should hedge on the reality that Spanish speakers will be looking you up online or either looking for help online, and they're going to go to the first available options that are presented to them authentically in Spanish. And when we talk to attorneys who say, but Hugo, the Hispanic market, like how connected are they on digital? It's all the data supports. I mean, this is from the Pew Research Center, Nielsen, Entravision, a bunch of media studies. I won't bore you with the specifics, but here are the main takeaways. Hispanics over-index on using their phones as their primary internet device. So what does that mean? Advertise on mobile. Like put your dollars in Spanish on mobile. The second takeaway is Hispanics over-index on consuming streaming video. So my takeaway there is, okay, don't just advertise on mobile. Make sure the mobile ad is a video.
Got it.
And then
Yeah.
the third one is Hispanics over-index on trust in social media. So I think that my speculation on that is that Hispanics are overwhelmingly community-based, offline, but also online. So what they read online from their peers is meaningful to them. So what does that mean? Don't just run mobile ads on video, but distribute them through social media channels. Don't just put them on your website. Don't just put them on, a local community website, a nonprofit or whatever. It's like put it on social media, like distribute it there, accelerate it with some ad dollars, some sponsor dollars. If you check those 3 boxes, I try not to like overcomplicate. I know I talk a lot about, immigrant data and using census data and localized immigration market research. That is important, but the end outcome will always come to what are we putting on video ads that are mobile friendly, distributed through social. If you check off those 3 boxes, you're ahead of like 90% of the firms that are just putting that Google Translate button on their website, which we all know it sucks. It's not very good, but
It's not
it
very
gets the
good.
job done. It's better than nothing. Everyone talks ill of Google Translate, and I'm like, at least you're making an effort. I think that's fantastic. It's a literal translation. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just not that exciting. So I think
Yeah.
that there's avenues. If you're really intentional about it, address and accept the fact that Hispanics are super connected. They're very sophisticated on social, mobile, video. And so just attract that, appeal to that. If you appeal to that, again, you're ahead of most firms trying to dabble in Spanish marketing.
I like it. And I mean, it sounds like a lot of it comes back to strategy, right? So
Yeah.
you're just everything you said there was you're looking at the data, you're looking at what you see, and you're creating a strategy and say, all right, well, we're going to do mobile ads, and we're going to put them in these places, and so setting that strategy up and doing the research for your firm or your area, and then executing on that. And so, and yeah, to your point, yeah, the Google Translate, it's anyone that you go, yeah, it's not perfect, and it's whatever, but it's something. You can definitely take it a step further. I've had clients where we built sites where we literally it's handwritten by the clients in multiple languages, and they have someone
Yeah.
that speaks those languages, and then you can have a real language switcher that's handwritten that switches the whole site to that version of it. It's a lot more work. It depends on how accurate you want to be and how much effort you want to put into it. But and there's some other tools out there too these days with AI and some other really well translated stuff that is also indexable. And I think that's another thing when you're thinking about Google and someone searching. Index like the Google Translate won't. It's not indexed the same way. It's not going to be.
Yeah,
It's not
hard
indexed.
coded.
It's just
It's not hard
it's a
coded.
tool.
Yeah.
It's just a layer.
Yeah, so the way you can actually index it is, especially if you have a WordPress site, WordPress has the WPML tool. It's like I think $300 a year. It's a great
They have a
license.
ton of plugins and stuff.
Yeah, a
with that
lot of
tool.
plugins where you can flip the language and it's indexable. It doesn't just do this like auto live update. It just goes to dedicated pages in Spanish. So if you have sitemap English, sitemap Spanish, they'll be mirrored versions of each other, but you're literally having double the amount of pages that are
Yeah, they're indexable content in
and they're
Spanish.
indexable.
Yeah. So if I look at like some of my tools, I can see, the volume of the same search term in Spanish versus English, right? And then
Yeah,
if you
exactly.
search it in Spanish, like I was saying in Google, if you search in Spanish, you're going to get totally different results than if you search in English. And the firms that don't have Spanish, just they're not going to be playing that game. They're not going to be. I mean, Google might do its own ability to try to like tie the two together, but you're making Google think at that
Yeah.
point and work for it. So
Yeah, but the indexability is so huge. Like that's a more nerdier part of the scope of work, but it is vital. You need so aside from Google Trends, I think Google Translation is a great stepping stone entry point into presenting your firm in different languages to different groups of the market. But to do it the right way, to your point, it's got to be indexable. Again, more work. It's just more work. You have to reverse engineer your site so that it could accommodate these plugins, so that it can accommodate all these features that can have mirrored versions that are uniquely tailor written in Spanish. It's more work, but it pays off. And even in a small market like Virginia, where the Hispanic market is small, let's say you get a sign up once a month or every other quarter. Considering the average marketing retainer out there, I mean, the ROI is like self-evident. So just be there, just even if it's not like overwhelming now, at some point the market will grow in your local neighborhood.
And you'll be ahead of the game.
You'll be way ahead.
So, I guess let's kind of think about a couple things here at the end about, we've already covered some of it, but Google Translate's a good, easy option. Super simple, right? It doesn't take any effort. And drop in a piece of code pretty much, and you can get that on your site. I guess where my head's going is a firm's listening right now, and they're going, "Well, we've thought about it, but don't know where to start, and I don't want to go big, but I'd like to test it out a little bit." So, Google Translate, great idea. What else could they do that would be like super easy to plug in and just test it out? Hey, we got a couple calls and this looks to be working. Now let's put a little bit more behind it.
I have really bad news, and I hate this answer, but it's bad news. There's no shortcut or dipping your toes in the water in the Hispanic market. And it's not because
I like it.
We don't want to. We've tried. And I'll give you some examples in our early days. In the early days of the agency where you're like, shit, I'll try anything to work, right? You're just figuring things out. in the early days, I just wanted to test with certain, let's call them solo practitioners that didn't have the most meaningful marketing budgets, but they knew that they needed to do something in Spanish.
Sure.
Our standard model is talking to an attorney, figuring out what their brand angle, what their new website is going to look like, what their new photo shoot's going to look like, what their videos are going to look like, new social media pages, new landing pages, new tracking methods, etc. Like end to end, we're essentially building a business in Spanish.
Yep.
So
Yep.
we talked to attorneys about that, certain solo practitioners in our early days, and they said, that seems like a lot, not just on investment, but just on commitment. How do we just try this out? And so we said, okay, why don't we just try to build you like a microsite? Give us a couple $1,000, give us 3 months, let's give it a shot. And we would tell them in full transparency, it's not the model that we typically work in, but you seem to really want to try this out. Dip your toe in the water. Let's figure this out. Failure rate, not even 100%, 100 million %. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And we've tried we try this even like every other quarter, like another kind of shortcut. There's no shortcut.
Let's just test another idea. All right, let's keep it going.
Yeah, like I just figure like there's always a way to innovate and kind of like trim costs, trim ways to make the bar of entry lower for an attorney trying to do this. And the reality is you can't. And what we find is that the firms that are with us in our general services, where we're taking management and control of that entire Spanish digital marketing strategy, it works. Why? Because everything's connected. The brand is intentional. The website's intentional. The copy is written. The photos are bespoke. The videos are custom in Spanish. The social media accounts are branded in Spanish. So the whole thing from first impression of an ad to not even when it's retained, but the client experience after, it's like we manage all of that. And so if one of those, parts of the supply chain are broken, it poses a risk to the whole thing.
Yep,
so
yeah, the other person on the other end is going, oh, there's an ad, and then they go, oh, English site, doesn't say anything about it. Like it's just they're not getting that full experience where you're saying they're just the whole time like, wow, this is exactly who I need to hire.
So it's what I was promised as a Hispanic consumer. I see the ad, and all the way through, the firm has held to the commitment and the promises that they advertised to me. So it's a lot of work, but I find that those are the programs that have a super high success rate. Out of, let's call it 50 attorneys that apply for this program, probably 2 or 3 are actually ready. That's like what we find. So, we don't onboard a bunch of members at a time. Like we have other programs for solo practitioners. They're called like social media accelerators. They get you eyeballs. They can potentially get you some leads. They're longer term plays. But for the ones that are super dedicated to making an impression in the market, it's all in or nothing. And so, for lack of a better word, our sales calls, they're just longer. There's just multiple consulting calls. We're trying to do due diligence on them as much as they're doing their due diligence on us. And so, and I'm sure you've seen that with your let's call it higher ticket clients. That's what they are. They want more out of the market. They want more market share, but it comes at a cost of your investment, your time, and your level of commitment with the organization. Because every attorney on this listening to this knows that they're not doing the majority of the work here. It's the paralegals, it's intake, it's case management staff, it's support staff. They all need to be looped in on this. So I just like to be explicit. I would love to say that there's a shortcut in the Hispanic market. There are none, man. I wish.
Hey, man, that's perfect answer. Like I said, hey, someone needs. What can they do? And you're like, they need to go on, that's what they need to hear. And so, if you feel this is an area that you want to get into and you see is viable for your business, then go all in, right? And and talk to someone like Hugo. Or probably only Hugo, because there's not a lot of people doing what he's doing. So, and here's the thing, like the way we intake people or work with firms at Array It's a very in-depth interview process and figuring out their firm and their business. Because I have a lot of firms who are like, yeah, I'm just switching from this SEO company to this. It's like, whoa, okay. Well, what are you trying to accomplish? What did you do in the
Right.
past? Where are you trying to go? What's your revenue? What's your lead counts? Where are they coming from? What's your average client worth? And there's just a lot of questions, right? And so if they're just trying to hop from one to the other, we're not a fit.
Oh,
And
yeah. Yeah,
and then
exactly.
we're not going to get the information we need to even be successful, like you're talking about. Like we have to do a lot of due diligence and working with them to help them. And you know,
Yeah, it's wild how many of these conversations that I have with attorneys are rarely about marketing.
mm,
It's almost always like, at least for me, because that's for me as a qualifier. Like, I want to work with an attorney in these programs that have clear business goals or a vision
yeah,
of what the next quarter or the next year looks like, because that's the starting point. That's the agreed upon end goal, right? If we don't have that, no widget, no SEO program, no agency is going to solve for any problems that you may have or challenges if they're not clearly defined.
a
You
hundred
know, and
percent. And
it needs to start there. It needs to start at the business outcome. You know,
yeah,
no one buys a drill, they buy the hole, right?
that's a good point. No, I mean, yeah, all my conversations are business. There's like no mention of much marketing stuff at all because we're not at that point yet, and there's no need to even get there. So, you need so much information and understanding the firm, their brand, where they want to go. And if they don't give you the time to do that or have that conversation, they want the whole right with
Yeah.
jumping and not and have you do everything on your own with and figure it all out. Like it's just not going to work, and they're going to go from agency to agency
Yeah.
because the law firm's listening and you're like, hey, the agency's responsible and they got to do it all. And I'm just going to sign a contract and they just got to make it happen. And if you're in their third or fourth agency, there's probably a problem, which is you. The firm has responsibilities. The firm has a brand. It has to have goals. It has to be properly staffed, to have processes in place, and be able to even accomplish those goals or take an influx of leads if you were to get them. And so there's a lot of responsibility that's on both sides. It's a two-way street.
It
You
is.
have to have
I'm
those conversations.
no, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I'm not trying to indemnify the responsibility that we have as marketers. Like, we have a huge responsibility to perform. I'm with that, but it is two-way street in that we need call feedback. We need you to be available on all the calls, not some of them or most of them, all of them. This is a partnership. I
Yeah,
really don't like calling ourselves a vendor. Like, I feel like we're not a line
I hate
item.
that.
We're a critical component to your business, and we feel like we should be treated as such, by you showing up to meetings, by your team filling out intake feedback forms, by there being a symbiotic, a very consistent back and forth on how things are going, not just when things are going poorly, because they do, right? That's just like the ebb
Yeah,
and
it
flow
happens.
of marketing. And the hope is that the net result is better than where you started, right? And so that can only happen if it's clearly, if there's that accepted responsibility on the firm side as well. So I think attorneys don't like to hear that, but again, in the interest of being transparent and explicit, like, we're not going to work with attorneys that think that this is sort of like a lead generation service. Lead
Yeah,
generation is and one of the outcomes of our service, certainly, and obviously the most important one, but it isn't the only one, and it's so much more than that. And I think the ones that crush it, at least in our business, the attorneys that crush it, not just in injury law, but even in let's call it retail retainer law, like criminal defense,
hmm,
family,
yep.
even they're crushing it because they're doing the work, right? They're doing the work that's required, and we're having just very honest conversations back and forth between our teams to ensure that we're fulfilling on our responsibilities, and that they are too.
100% spot on. So all you attorneys listening, my favorite attorneys out there listening, and clients. I have clients listening probably too. But yeah, 100%. All that stuff that you just said, and I agree with. It's a two-way street. There's things that this firm has to do, provide, show up to meetings, have the capability, bandwidth to work with your agency partner, right? Not a vendor. That can make or break you. And I have so many awesome clients that they're excited to be on meetings. They're excited to learn. They want to know what more they can do. We give them recommendations on stuff that we don't even help with. And that's the kind of relationship we want to have. And if they need new photos and maybe they're in a different state, right? They gotta do some of that work. They gotta take our recommendations. And then when things are bad, we need to know about it. But we also need to have those constant communications so that there's not just 6 months and then things are terrible and what happened. Like there should never be that kind of surprise because there's so much communication and talking through it. And I'll have like new clients be like, well, do we get like a dashboard or a report every month? Well, yeah, of course. But the conversation that we're going to have each month and sitting down with my team is way more powerful when we dig into the calls and how they were. And let's look at the leads. Are they the ideal customer? You can get calls all day long. Doesn't mean they're the right calls. So you have to have a lot more in-depth conversation around this stuff versus just, well, the metrics look good. Well, that's easy,
Yeah.
You have a ton of SEO, like organic traffic, and it's all come from some national news blog, and it is nothing that a client is going to find you for and matter. So I can show you that your traffic's going up, but it's not the right traffic. It's the wrong content, So it's just you got to be engaged with your agency, and you got to be prepared to do it.
Yeah, partnership.
You're not going to have long-term success. Maybe you get some success out the gate because they're doing the heavy lifting, but it won't last.
Or scale.
Yeah. So treat us like partners, please. That's all we want.
I mean, aren't the best relationships that you have with your clients the ones that feel like you're their extended marketing department?
100%. 100%. And they ask us for things, again, opinions on stuff that we don't sell, that we don't have anything to do with. We have knowledge of it.
Yeah.
And we have our thoughts, and we'll even do data research or try to help plug into it or set up Zapier to integrate stuff, again, outside of what we even do. And we appreciate when they bring stuff to us. And sometimes we're like, yeah, we don't do that. But here's someone that can.
Right.
Hey, we want to get into Spanish. We can't help you really. Hugo, he's my guy. Let's get you in touch. So we want that type of relationship. And here's the thing. We're going to go, my team will go out of their way for those clients. They want to help those clients, and people like people, and they do business with people they like. So the clients that we see more often that engage with us, you're just naturally going to get more from the agency partner you have.
Yeah.
If you don't show up, you're mean, you just show up and demand stuff. We've fired many of those clients.
All the time.
They have to go figure something else out. So,
great takeaways. Yeah.
Well, I do have to go, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I have a time crunch today, and I apologize for that. But Hugo, I mean, just love talking with you. Interesting model and niche that you're in, that you're fulfilling. And honestly, I don't know if I know anyone that's doing this in your space. And so
me neither. If you do, let me know. I would love to meet him.
Kudos to you. And all our attorney friends out there, you got to think about this market. Are you advertising the Spanish market? Do you have these things in place? Are you tiptoed into it and you think it's not working? Or how many of you gone all in and can comment on this if you're watching and say, hey, this works for us. We've gotten tons of clients from it, and it's growing for your firm. We just love to hear feedback. And if you need help, have questions, you can always ping me. I can connect you with Hugo. If not Hugo, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, it's right there. The website, abogadosnow.com. You could also email me directly. I do respond to all my emails. Hugo@abogadosnow.com.
It's not an AI that responds?
No, not yet.
Not yet. It will be.
Not yet. Ask me next year.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, hey, I appreciate the conversation around this, and I just love you bringing unique conversations to the table. And I loved our little chat about agency partnerships with our law firm clients. And yeah, if you're listening to that, like, think about your existing relationship, or do you even have one? And question that, and step back and say, hey, yeah, our stuff doesn't really perform that well, but I never talked to them. Agencies will take their pay and go, well, they're not talking to us. I guess we'll just keep going this direction.
Right.
And or they're not trying and they're not paying attention. I don't know, but it's a hard spot to be in as an agency, to be like, well, we're just have to figure it out, and they won't show up to any calls. And we have a couple clients like that. If you're listening, probably not listening, but you know who you are. Yeah, make the time. Take this stuff serious. I mean, it could really be the difference on you growing and scaling or not. So,
yeah.
Hugo, anything else you want to add before we roll?
No, I think we covered it. If you're not Spanish ready, it's time to start.
I love it. All right. Well, you heard the man. Get out there and do it. Reach out to me, reach out to him, and we'll point you in the right direction. So everyone have a great day. Hugo, you can see on with me backstage, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.